Okay. So now it has started recording, and yeah. So okay. So welcome back. And last time we discussed only one theorem. No, what was it? Lusin's theorem, and many of you must have seen this in MSc. What was our spelling of Lucin?
L-U-S-I-N.
S-I-N, and if you have Googled, you would have seen another spelling, or maybe in MSc it was another spelling. Can you guess what the other spelling is?
L-U-Z-I-N.
Z-I. Maybe that's more common. Like in Wikipedia, it is L-U-Z-I-N, but I stuck to S-I-N because that's how it's in Rodin. Okay, and Luzin is a very interesting personality. If you Google, you will know. So let me not get into that. In fact, there is a whole book about. I think those of you who are interested, Google and you go to Wikipedia page of Luzin, and there's a whole section, a big section on what is called the Luzin affair. I think there were issues between him and his students, PhD students, and all that, and maybe some political issues. They tried to make certain cases against him, including that of plagiarism and all that. And there's a whole book which was in Russian and got translated some 2-3 years back, maybe 4-5 years back. It's a costly book, but okay, I'm on the record. But still, I thought I would buy that book because I had some free AMS points. American Math Society translated that, and I was getting it free. And but the book never came. I think in customs or somewhere, it got misplaced. So I wrote to them, and they shipped another copy. They trusted my word and shipped another copy. That copy also never came. So, then I felt bad to write to them again. So I thought, let it. Okay. So I feel like I know Luzin very well because of this incident. Anyway, so let me start sharing the screen, and then we will quickly recall, and then we will continue. Okay. So this recalling part, I would prefer if you do it. So this is today's slides. I hope you can see. So what's the keyword? The keywords today with Vitaly Karatheodori. Have you heard both these names?
Yes, sir.
These are two names. Where did you hear Vitaly? I can't hear you.
Vitaly construction of non-measurable sets.
Vitaly?
Construction of non-measurable sets.
Non-measurable sets. Very good. So which book mentions his name? Like Rodin doesn't mention Vitaly's name there.
I think Royden.
Royden does. Okay. Who's this? Is this Manoj or?
Yes,
who's
sir.
Manoj. Manoj. Okay. So Royden mentions. Yeah. So Wikipedia also says. And Karatheodori? Has anyone heard?
Yes, sir.
Where?
I heard it on the definition of Lebesgue measurable sets. Karatheodoric criteria.
Constantine Karatheodori?
Yeah, this is Constantine Karatheodori. Yes.
I heard this name in the Riemann mapping theorem where he tries to prove the Riemann mapping
theorem. This name
I read it in the Wikipedia.
Wikipedia. Okay, so I should also read because yesterday also I read his page at Wikipedia, but I read it fast. In Riemann mapping theorem, I didn't notice, but you may be right. But again, Rodin doesn't mention his name, I think, in Riemann mapping theorem, because I did teach Riemann mapping theorem last year, and I followed Rodin, and I did not check the notes part. Maybe I will do it because yesterday I read a lot about Karatheodori. There's again a book which I did not know about. I forget the author's name. Large book, some 600 plus pages. So in Google Books, some pages will come free, so I was going through those. Yeah. So apparently, not apparently, I mean, he's a Greek mathematician and one of the most important names in early 20th century mathematics. So yeah, last time we did Lucin's theorem. So what did it essentially say? How many of you Googled for Littlewood's principles? I had asked you to do it. Did anyone read these 3 principles? No? Okay. No, you can say no. No,
Yes,
by being silent. So,
forgot to do.
huh?
Forgot about using.
Forgot. No, I can't hear properly.
Yes, sir. Forgot. I forgot.
So do it later. So this is one of them. Egorov. By the way, Egorov was Lucin's PhD advisor, and Urizon was Lucin's student. And Egorov's theorem and Lucin's theorem are 2 of those principles. And Lucin's theorem says that every measurable function is nearly a continuous function. Meaning, given epsilon, I can find a G continuous of compact support that the points where they differ has measure less than epsilon. What are the hypotheses? It has in RRT, locally compact Hausdorff space, and a measure satisfying all those properties. Okay. What was the main idea of the proof? How did we prove it? First, we proved a particular case, no? And then we proved the general case, right?
Yes.
And what was the assumptions when we proved the particular case? F is bounded and bounded was without loss of generality, F less than 1, 0 less than equal to F less than 1. And what was the assumption in the theorem itself? There's a set of finite measure inside which the support is contained, right?
Yes.
And we assume that that set itself is compact. Yes?
Compact.
Yeah, that was the first thing. And then what was the proof? What was the main idea? You wanted to write F as an infinite series using simple functions, right? You remember we recall that construction of simple functions approximating the function, which we had called Sn, and Sn minus 1 you call Tn, and you wrote F as summation Tn or summation 2 power minus n Tn.
Tn,
Summation Tn. And this is fine because partial sums was Sn and limit is F. This we wrote, and then the next step was for each of Tn you got an Hn, and there you took summation 2 power minus n Hn or something, right?
Yes.
And how did that Hn come? This Hn was CCX. How did you get that Hn? Hns must have come from. Hn must have come from Urizon. No, how else you can get Hn? So that means there is compact contained in open situation. And yes, so these Tn's you had, and then you realize those as characteristic function of capital Tn, no? Maybe 2 power n or something is there. And then each of this Tn, you chose Kn and Vn, and sandwiching you applied, right?
Yes, continuing B.
And sandwiching you can apply because these Tn's have finite measure. Tn's have finite measure because A itself is compact and Tn is contained in A. Or later A itself has finite measure. So you can apply sandwiching, you will get Kn and Kn contained in Tn contained in Vn.
Continuing B.
What is V? Yes, Kn contained in Tn contained in Vn contained in V. But what is this V? What is this V?
V was open set containing A.
Yeah. So we are assuming A is compact and we chose an open set V containing A such that V bar is compact, right?
Yes, nice.
And here we use locally compact Hausdorff in order to get this. And this was important later because you will construct a continuous function G and you wanted to show that it had compact support. This is the point where I got stuck a little bit last time.
Yes.
Right? Though it was coming in my slides, I had forgotten. and V bar compact was used there. Okay. So each of this, yeah. So Kn contained in Tn contained in Vn contained in V, and for this you applied Urison and got Hn, and you did a summation on Hn maybe after multiplying properly by a 2 power minus n or something, and that converges uniformly, and therefore that is a continuous function. And it was easy to show that where these two differ. Yeah, by sandwiching, you are making the measure really small, and therefore you could show that where they differ, that is less than epsilon, measures less than epsilon. So this would take care of compact case. And what about general finite measure? General finite measure, you will use regularity, inner regularity.
Yes.
And approximate by a compact set, so that itself K and A differ only a little bit. That is important. And then we did one more trick, right? We did this B1 containing B2 containing etc. with intersection Bn as empty, and that also gives you an epsilon. So between K and A there is a small distance, and this construction gives you a measure of Bn goes to 0, and that goes to 0 is also a small epsilon. And this together with, you could write f as 1 minus characteristic function of Bn times f or something, and you got f into the bounded condition. So now it was general, f was not bounded, and A is not compact, but you could reduce to the previous case and you finish the proof. Right? And then Lucene had one more statement, no? You can arrange it so that supremum of
fx greater than gx.
Supremum of mod g is mod gx is less than or equal to supremum of mod fx. F is the measurable function, g is the continuous function of compact support, and supremum of the continuous function can be made less. And this we used a particular map and applied that, right? Remember, we defined phi of z to be z if mod z. You took the supremum of mod fx, capital R, and mod z less than or equal to R, its identity function, and then something else when mod z is bigger than R, and then we composed with that and made that arrangement. And then we stated a corollary, no? A very important corollary. What else went into the proof of that corollary other than Lucene's theorem? Another famous result went into that corollary. This is the last thing that we did last time, last slide. What was the very famous named result we used crucially? What was that?
Monotone converter.
Oral Cantelli.
Oral Cantelli. And what was the result? What was the result? If f is also says that mod f is less than 1, less than or equal to 1, then f can be written as, so f is a complex measurable function, mod f less than or equal to 1, then fx equal to limit gnx, where gn is ccx and mod gn less than or equal to 1. And this is true everywhere, or fx equal to limit gn is true where?
Where
Almost everywhere.
almost
Equal to
almost.
limit gnx almost everywhere. Can you recall the construction? Of course, applying Lucene. How did we do this? You have f given mod f less than or equal to 1. So applying Lucene, you can get a g ccx mod g less than or equal to 1, and where they differ small. And maybe you did this for 1 by 2 power n or something. For each 1 by 2 power n, you will get
En.
You will get gn, and you wanted to show that limit gn is this. And how did you finish the proof? Where f and gn differ, if you call that set en, then because measure is less than this, it satisfies the Borel-Cantelli assumption, right? What is the Borel-Cantelli assumption? Summation mu of en should be finite. So if you have chosen 1 by 2 power n, then summation of that is 1, so that is finite. So you can apply the conclusion of Borel-Cantelli, which is that almost every x belongs to at most finitely many of those sets, right? So if something does not belong to this set, that means fx equal to gnx. So if you choose n large enough, fx is gnx, and this is true for almost every x, and that finishes the proof. So you get fx equal to limit gnx almost every year. Yeah, that's all that we did last time, no?
Yes.
Okay. So today we are going to discuss. So this is Nikolai Lusin. In Wikipedia, it is Luzin. Please do read. It's interesting. Okay. And today, spelling mistake, no? Okay. So one mistake to correct. Today we discuss the Vitali-Carathéodory theorem, and this one of you pointed out. Vitali was the first to give an example. By the way, this one is coming in chapter 2, which I have skipped, okay, because I know that this is a well-known thing in MSc. Everyone does this, so I have skipped. So any set of any subset of real numbers with positive measure, Lebesgue measure, you can construct a non-measurable subset. Okay, so please go through that. It's very, very important. I'm not doing it because I know that in MSc it's an important result. Okay. Go through it anyway, it's not difficult, but it's a very beautiful construction. Little bit of group theory is used, though Rudin may not say that. So Vitali was the first to give an example of a non-measurable subset of real numbers, and this was in 1905. And that is quotation from Wikipedia, and this is Giuseppe Vitali, 1875 to 1932. Yeah, roughly these are all contemporaries, right? So more or less a similar time, these things were being developed. See, up to now, what were the famous names in our course that we have seen? Borel, of course. Borel and Lebesgue. Borel is French, right? Borel is French, and I thought Lebesgue is also French, and I told you so, but Lebesgue is German, maybe? I clarified this later, and again I have forgotten. So maybe Lebesgue was German, but worked in France or something. And Cantelli is Italian. And who else came? Hausdorff. Okay, that is topology, but German. Urizon is Russia. Yeah, so yesterday when I was reading about Lusin, I saw that this kind of function theory, measure theory, all these were big in Europe in that period. Germany, France, Italy. And Lusin and Egorov and Lusin were the people who started this in Russia, which was completely new in Russia at that time. And then they had the student Urizon, and then many other students. Kolmogorov, very, very important and famous mathematician, maybe one of the greatest mathematicians from Russia, Kolmogorov. All these people were Khinjan is another famous name. And yeah, so Lusin and Egorov were responsible for building this kind of mathematics in Russia. And Konstantin Carathéodory, as I read yesterday, was very, very important mathematician with lots of contributions in partial differential equations, calculus of variations. And also apparently, you know, very comfortable with so many languages he could speak. And also a very, very fine public speaker. So many people used to call him to, you know, speak in their functions. And he was the chair of the Fields Medal Committee for the very first Fields Medal. And it is from his hands that the first Fields Medalist took the award. Carathéodory distributed these first Fields Medals. Do you remember the year of the first Fields Medal? You know what is Fields Medal, no?
Yes.
And do you remember the first one? Which year?
Not in
I think it's 1936, and Alphonse was one of the medalists. You know Alphonse, right?
Yes, sir.
He has this famous book, Complex Analysis. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so same setting as in, can you guess? As in
Lusin.
Lusin, which is the same setting as in? You're right, same setting as in Lusin, which is the same setting as in?
RRT.
RRT. So that basically means locally compact Hausdorff space we are in, and the measure that we have satisfies all those conditions. Okay, so outer regularity, finite on compact sets, and complete. And if the set has finite measure, then also inner regular. These are the conditions. And we have a real valued function this time, and which is in L1 mu. What is L1 mu? Integrable function. What does that mean? Integral f d mu is
Less than infinity. Finite.
finite. Okay, so you have a real valued function and integral f d mu is finite is given, and now you are going to this another approximation theorem. So given epsilon, you are going to sandwich f between two functions u and v, and you are going to say that the integral, so that the integral of v minus u is arbitrarily small. Okay, so there are functions u and v. U is less than or equal to f less than or equal to v, and where u is, does anyone remember this theorem? This was there in MSc. Can you, if you have seen it, can you fill in the blanks? What is the condition on u? If you have seen it before, otherwise fine. How many of you have seen this result before? You have to say no, otherwise I don't know.
I have heard, sir, but nothing.
You have heard, but you might not have seen. So u is
continuous.
U is upper semi-continuous. Okay, so U for upper maybe. U is upper semi-continuous, and I'm going to say U is also bounded. Above or below, you have to tell me. If the function is upper semi-continuous, and if you are putting a further restriction on U, is it going to be bounded above or bounded below? I'm going to say there is a boundedness condition. And I don't immediately recall, let us say, bounded above or bounded below. What should be the condition?
Upper, then bounded upper. Upper bound.
So it is upper semi-continuous. So what is upper semi-continuous? What is the definition? All those points where fx is less than alpha is open, right?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Less than
Yes.
alpha is open.
Yes.
So, and from Wikipedia, I made this quotation, no? Suppose f is from R to R, and if you have a continuous function, and at one point, if you do something, then it's a good example of an upper semi-continuous function which is not continuous. What did you do at one point? Did you raise it or did you lower it?
Raise it.
Raise it. So you keep that in picture. If you raise a little bit, it is an upper semi-continuous function. You can raise even more. You can raise as much as you want, right? All those are upper semi-continuous, no?
Yes.
So if you want to put a restriction, what will be the restriction? You don't want any upper semi-continuous function, is what I want to say.
Bound.
So you cannot raise
Bounded
as much as you want. So bounded
above.
above. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, bounded above. Okay, and v. Now you tell me what should be v. If u is upper semi-continuous and bounded above, what should be the condition on v? Mathematics is very symmetric, no? So what should be the condition?
Lower continuous.
Lower semi-continuous and
Bounded below.
Bounded below.
and bounded below. Okay, so these are the conditions. And then the result is saying, so here also one typo because a remark should come after pause. So two typos. Integral of v minus u d mu is arbitrarily small. Believable, no? I mean, it's a nice result because suppose, you know, you take f itself. Suppose f itself is continuous. If f itself is continuous and if f is also bounded above and below, then you could have taken u to be f and v to be f. And what will be this? This will be 0, right? F minus f. So this is the next best thing. So if f is only integrable, continuity is not there, but then you can get upper semi-continuous and lower semi-continuous so that the difference has very small area, so to say. You know, the difference, the integral is arbitrarily small. Okay, so it's an important result. And the remark is what I just said. So do you know this English word mnemonic? How many of you knew this word?
I don't know. Basically, it's like abbreviation sort of thing.
Basically, it is?
Like we'll do some abbreviation to remember some long list or something.
Okay, so it need not be an abbreviation, I think. But what you said later is the correct thing. It is a memory aid. You know, anything that you do in order to remember, I think is a mnemonic. If it is an abbreviation, then I should not use it. So I will double check. Since you said abbreviation, I will double check. If mnemonic means that, then I should not use that word because here I am using it as something which is a memory aid. Yeah. So who said this? Was it Krishna?
Yes, I don't know whether it is abbreviation, but we
It may
generally
not be. I think it's memory 8 because I made a mistake. So I did check, I typed PNEMONIC and then I was checking and I realized, okay, spelling is, like pneumonia and all, I thought I knew the word mnemonic and I started with a T and it is MNEMONIC. Okay, Vicky quoted on page 6 of lecture 5. Do you recall what is this memory 8? It is exactly what we discussed some time back. Upper continuous, you move up, it is still upper semi-continuous and not continuous, that particular one, and that is good in order to remember whether it is bounded above or bounded below that comes. Okay. So being bounded above is a real restriction on an upper semi-continuous function, and similarly in the other case. So let's prove this result. Yeah. So first we are going to assume f is positive, f is non-negative, and also f is not identically 0. Okay. And if f is identically 0, there's nothing to prove, no? If f is identically 0, then you can take both u and v to be where did my screen go? Yeah. So if f is identically 0, then both u and v can be identically 0, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So that case anyway you don't have to do. So assume f is non-negative and f is not identically 0. So we know that there exists simple functions, right? F is measurable. So you will get simple functions monotonically increasing, approximating it. Usually we say S1 less than or equal to S2, etc. I have added S0, which is just a 0 function. Doesn't matter. Such that fx is limit Snx, and we are going to take fx as summation Tnx. What is Tn here? What is Tn?
Sn minus 1.
Sn plus
Sn
1
minus Sn minus 1. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember this Tn, how Tn's were in the proof of Lucen's theorem? You got as characteristic functions, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Characteristic function of capital Tn, but all those we got because we were considering f less than 1. Here, f is not less than 1.
Yes.
So Tn is just Sn minus 1, but still they are simple functions. No, difference of two simple functions is simple, right?
Yes.
So you may not get it as a characteristic function of a single set, but you will still get it as characteristic linear non-negative positive linear combination of characteristic functions, right? That is still true. So we are going to write it like that. Tn is a linear combination of characteristic functions, positive linear combination of characteristic functions. Why positive linear combination? Usually simple function just means a linear combination. It need not be positive linear combination. Why positive here?
F is positive.
Sn is increasing.
Because we are assuming f is non-negative. Yeah, because characteristic functions is only 0 or 1, so the coefficients have to be positive. Coefficient can be 0, but then you don't write it. Okay, that's all. So you can write it like this as summation Cn chi En. You agree? Summation Tnx you can write like fx as summation Cn chi En, where Ens are Ens are measurable sets, right? Agree?
Yes.
See, all these simple functions, all these things, whatever comes, these are characteristic functions of measurable sets. So ENs are measurable, but it need not be disjoint. We are not putting that extra thing. It need not come as disjoint, but doesn't matter for our proof. Okay. Now it is about upper semi-continuity and lower semi-continuity, and we will have to recall a little bit of that, but let's do a bit more. This is what is given to us, right? What is this condition in the statement? F belongs to
L1.
L mu. Now f is the summation Cn chi En. So what is the integral of f? You know that you can interchange by MCT. So this is summation Cn, integral of f is summation Cn, integral of chi En, which is mu of En. So summation Cn mu of En is finite. This converges. This is the condition that is given to you. Agree? In particular, measure of En is finite, no? right? No, if the summation is finite, then measure of En is finite, right, for each n.
Yes.
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 Okay. So En belongs to MF, and if something belongs to MF, what will you do?
Sandwich it.
Sandwiching, and therefore you get Kn and Vn such that Kn contained in En contained in Vn. Okay. And we are going to argue with this Kn and Vn, and such that the measure, the difference can be made arbitrarily small. So you make it smaller than epsilon by Cn times 2 power n plus 1. Okay, this Cn is also there. We can do this, right? So this is sandwiching, and this will come in handy. And at this stage, I am saying that you should be able to guess what is U and what is V. You may not be completely correct at this stage, but it's okay. Quote unquote, you can guess. Morally, you will be right. What should be U and what should be V?
U should be characteristic function of Kn.
Yeah, so recall characteristic function of open sets are what and characteristic function of closed sets are what?
Open sets are lower semi-continuous.
Lower semi-continuous, and therefore U should be what? F is this.
Closed set.
You know, F corresponds to this. So U should correspond to summation Cn mu of no. What I want to say is characteristic function of, so F is this. F is this. So U should be summation Cn characteristic function of
Kn.
Kn.
Kn. Because Kn is compact, therefore it is closed. So chi Kn is upper semi-continuous, and V should be summation Cn chi Vnx. Chi Vn is lower semi-continuous. Okay, you are correct, but not quite. Can one of you tell me where you are not quite correct? Then the proof is over. If you observe that, the proof is over. One of that is absolutely correct. One of your candidates for U or V, I'm not telling you which one, is absolutely correct. One of that you is not absolutely correct. It is correct, but not quite. That's the only point to remember in this proof.
Cn should be there.
Louder.
Cn should be there, I think.
Cn should be there. That part is okay. Because only then, you know, this has Cn, so there also Cn should be there. Because, see, suppose, you know, you are right. You got U to be summation Cn chi Kn and V to be summation Cn chi Vn. Now you have to take V minus U, which will be Cn chi Vn minus chi En. So you have to take integral of V minus U, and this will solve the problem. This will solve the problem because you have chosen Vn and Kn so that the measure is small, no? So you will get Cn times this is less than epsilon by 2 power n plus 1. So summation of this is epsilon. So you're done. The proof is done. Only thing is, you know, our assertion, there's a small problem in one of the two assertions. Which one is not fully correct? Okay, let me ask you. Is V equal to summation? Okay, it's coming in the slides. So let's go to the slides. So this is what we are using. Okay, one more thing. This is a digression. You know this result already. Have you ever seen this? A positive linear combination of lower semi-continuous function is lower semi-continuous. A linear combination is always a finite linear combination. And the linear combination of upper semi-continuous function is upper semi-continuous. Need not be positive, any linear combination. So basically you are saying that if f and g are lower semi-continuous, then f plus g is lower semi-continuous. If f and g are upper semi-continuous, then f plus g is upper semi-continuous. Have you seen this before?
So here we are taking infinite sum of lower semi-continuous.
Finite sum only. So basically you need to prove it only for 2. So you only need to prove for sum of 2. If f and g are lower semi-continuous, f plus g is lower semi-continuous. Have you proved
we are
this?
using here infinite sum. we are using here infinite sum of u.
Forget that. This is a digression. I'm not talking about the Vitali-Carathéodory. I'm saying something else. I'm just making this condition that if f and g are lower semi-continuous, I am telling you that f plus g is lower semi-continuous. Question is, have you proved this? Or have you seen a proof, or do you know this result?
So we can do by sequential criteria.
You can do using
Sequential criteria.
What is sequence criteria? You may be right, but what is it? I don't know. What do you mean by sequence criteria? Like for continuous functions, I know if xn converges to x, then fxn converges to fx. But for upper semi-continuous and lower semi-continuous?
I think here we were going.
You are right. There is such a thing.
Sup of limit or infimum of limit we are working.
Yeah. So you may assume X is a metric space for that, no?
Oh yes, yeah. Either first continuum. Yes.
Yeah, something you need, no? This Xn converges to X.
Yes.
Yeah. But it can be made sense in any topological space also using this net or filter or whatever. Okay. So you can do that, but my only point is you should see a proof, because from our definition it's not that obvious, though it can be proved using our definition. Okay. So you do prove this. We are going to use this at the very end. Okay. That was a digression. We are going to take V to be summation Cn chi Vn. Now summation Cn chi Vn you can write as limit of the partial sums, right? It's an infinite sum, so it's limit of partial sums, but limit is same as sup, no? Because Cn's are positive, it's an increasing sequence, so limit is same as sup, right? You agree?
Yes.
Yes,
yeah. Now summation Cn chi Vn is lower semi-continuous. You don't need the previous slide for that. This can be checked directly, because Vn's are open and these are characteristic functions. Summation Cn chi Vn is lower semi-continuous. And what do you know about supremum of lower semi-continuous functions?
It's again lower semi. Again lower semi-continuous.
Again lower semi-continuous. Therefore, V is lower semi-continuous is not a problem. And F is less than or equal to V is clear, no? Because F is Cn chi En. Chi En is less than or equal to chi Vn, right? Because En is contained in Vn. So this part is okay. Now can you guess what the problem with your definition of U is?
Yes, you may not be upper semi-continuous.
Yeah, because you will get supremum of upper semi-continuous functions, but we don't have a result there, no? We only know that the infimum of upper semi-continuous is upper semi-continuous. Okay, so except for this small problem, this is a very small problem. This can be rectified. Except for this small problem, your idea is correct. So what about U? The last step of sup will not work. Therefore, what will we do? We will take only a finite sum. We will not take an infinite sum and argue with a finite sum. Okay, so take a finite sum. This is upper semi-continuous, not a problem, no?
Yes.
This is upper semi-continuous, and we are going to choose n large enough so that this summation, the tail of the infinite part, is less than epsilon by 2. Why is the tail arbitrarily small? You can make the tail arbitrarily small. Why?
But this series is convergent.
Because the series is convergent. Because the series is convergent. You can do this because the tail of a convergent series tends to 0. Okay. So now we can argue. Now we can take V minus U. Now U is upper semi-continuous and U is less than or equal to F. Clear? So you got upper semi-continuous less than or equal to F, less than or equal to lower semi-continuous. And now we are going to take the difference. So V minus U is...
Sir, this time how this is less than F, sir?
How is this less than F? Because C is summation Cn chi Kn, which is less than or equal to summation 1 to n Cn chi En, because Kn is contained in En. And a finite sum of summation Cn chi En is less than or equal to the infinite sum of summation Cn chi En, because Cn's are positive.
That is F.
Okay, so U is less than or equal to F. And now we are going to take V minus U. And why am I taking V minus U? Because I have to integrate V minus U, right? Now V minus U is summation Cn chi Vn infinite sum minus summation Cn chi Kn finite sum. So I have taken the finite part here and the infinite part for only chi Vn, because that was my definition of V. Agree? First line, you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now in the second line, what I have done is I have written this as n equal to 1 to infinity and adjusted for it. So I have taken this. Okay, maybe I could have written this directly. I could have written this directly. Maybe this was not required, but this is correct, no? I have put all the Cn chi Vn together and then I have subtracted infinite chi Kn, but you can subtract only the finite chi Kn. So I have added the infinite part here. So you agree with this also? Now this is chi Kn.
No, yeah.
Fine.
Yes, sir.
This is less than or equal to, this is same as this, and here I have made instead of Kn, En, because chi Kn is less than or equal to chi En, because Kn is contained in En. All right.
Yes. Yes.
Now, usual integration, if something is f is less than or equal to g, integral f is less than or equal to integral g. So integral of v minus u d mu is less than or equal to summation Cn of, what is integral of chi Vn minus integral of chi k? What is integral of chi Vn minus chi Kn? It is integral of chi Vn minus integral of chi Kn, which is mu of Vn minus mu of Kn, plus this. Now you have chosen n large enough so that this summation is less than, this integral is summation Cn mu En, and that is less than epsilon by 2. That was your choice of capital N. Agree?
Yes. Yes.
So this is epsilon by 2. Now this one is less than or equal to summation Cn mu of Vn minus Kn. Do you agree with that? What I'm saying is mu of Vn minus mu of Kn is less than or equal to mu of Vn minus Kn. That's also correct, no?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Because mu of A minus mu of B is less than or equal to mu of A minus B. Because A you can write as A minus B union B. So mu A is in fact equal, no? Equal or less than or equal?
Here I think
Equal, because
A
contained
is
in there.
Because A is A, if you have A and B, B is contained in A. You can write A as A minus B disjoint union B, right?
yes, sir.
These are equal to B is in sigma algebra. Since Vn is in sigma algebra, so it will be equal.
Yeah, so Kn is also in sigma algebra, no? Your sigma algebra contains all compact sets.
Yes.
We are as in RRT. And all open sets are also there. So that's fine. So Vn can be written as Vn minus Kn union Kn. That's a disjoint union. So mu of Vn is mu of Vn minus Kn plus mu of Kn. So it's actually an equality here. But the inequality is coming here, and this particular thing is inequality, but doesn't matter. I can put inequality also. So this is Cn mu of Vn minus Kn plus epsilon by 2. But this part is also epsilon by 2, less than or equal to. Why? Because mu of Vn minus Kn. Yeah, so this is not an equality. I can put an equality here, but this is an inequality. Because this is less than epsilon by 2 power n plus 1. So summation is less than epsilon by 2. Okay, so two more typos. Here I will make equality and here I will make inequality. And that is epsilon. This is what we had to show, right? But we are in the case Fs. F is non-negative. We are in the case F is non-negative. Now you have a general case. You can write it as positive part minus negative part, right? What was the definition of F plus? It is maximum of
F and 0.
F and 0, and F minus is minimum of F and 0. You can do this. Now F plus and F minus are measurable functions, right?
Yes, sir.
They are real, they are measurable, and they are positive. They are non-negative. So you can get for F plus, you can get U1 and V1 with all those conditions, and F minus you can get U2 and V2. U1 and U2 are upper semi-continuous, V1 and V2 are lower semi-continuous. V1 minus U1, the integral is arbitrarily small. V2 minus U2 is integral is small. Agree?
Yes.
Now we are done, no? So now you can tell me the upper semi-continuous function less than or equal to F and lower semi-continuous function bigger than or equal to F. What should they be? What is the upper semi-continuous function for F?
U1 minus U2.
U1 minus?
U2.
V2.
U1 minus V2, because V2 is lower semi-continuous, minus V2 is upper semi-continuous. Therefore, U1 minus V2 is upper semi-continuous because sum of two upper semi-continuous is upper semi-continuous.
Yes.
And similarly, the lower semi-continuous one will be V2 minus
V1 minus U2.
V1 minus U2, correct. This is also a typo. So many typos. This should be V1 minus U2. V1 minus U2. Is the difference small? So you have to take V1 minus U2 minus U1 minus V2. V1 minus U2 minus U1 minus V2. So what is that? V1 minus U2 so what is that? Can you just write it down and tell me? V1 minus U2 minus of, no, is it U1 minus V2 here? Yes, right? This is correct. No. This is fine, no?
Yes, sir, that is fine.
So, and this is wrong, and this should be U1 minus
V1
V2,
minus.
right?
Yes,
No,
V1 minus
V1 minus
U2.
U2. And therefore, what is V minus U? V1 minus U2.
So it will be U1 minus V1 minus U1 plus V2 minus U2.
Are you getting that? Is my question. So right hand side is V1 minus U2 minus U1 plus V2 is what you will get.
Yes.
So am I not getting V1 plus V2? Oh, that's okay, right? That's okay. That's okay. So V1 minus, yeah. So you will get V2 minus U2 plus V1 minus U1, and both can be made arbitrarily small. So some can be made arbitrarily small. So except this typo, everything is correct. So, and we are done. Fine. So this is the proof of Vitali-Carathéodory, and we can stop here. Yeah, so that's all that I have for today. And have you seen Agarov's theorem in MSc?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's coming in Rudin, it's coming as an exercise in the next chapter. So we will do Agarov also at some point. Otherwise, you do that exercise. Okay. So let me stop sharing the screen. And anything else? Any quick question or comment? So I had many typos today, which I will just correct and upload on Moodle. Nothing else. No, I can also stop recording. Okay, stop recording.